Hi guys, and welcome to this session on VLOOKUP index and match. Now, VLOOKUP is a function which we generally, I think you must have, if you have worked in the corporate world, you must have at least used once, right? And or you must have heard a lot of people whenever they talk about Excel, they want to learn Excel. The first function that comes to their mind is, using the VLOOKUP function. So we're gonna first dig into understanding what is a VLOOKUP function, and in the second video I will show you the limitations of VLOOKUP function and how index and match can be used to counter that limitation, right? So let's first get started with VLOOKUP. Now the case which we have taken out here, as we do in every Excel or financial modeling class, would always be related to a case study, right? And in this case we have a data of Nash Software Private Limited, and this is basically the sales data of that company. And you've been given the task to look up data using functions, right? And if you see on the right hand side, I've got some of the things which we have to look up, which is they've given us the customer number of the data which we have to look up, and of that customer number we have to find the customer name and the profits associated with that, right? Now, how do we do that? So one way, why do we even need a VLOOKUP function, is because if you manually try to go and search this, although there are ways to do that, but it's a tedious task, right? And it will take up a lot of time, right? So VLOOKUP, in a matter of seconds, you can just put up a formula and then it will give you the data. And looking up manually, every time you cannot just go and put a filter and try to then search the customer number. So it's a longer process, and plus you cannot use that data into a formula, right? So if in case the data structure changes, then you will have to again go and manually look up, and that's the reason why you have the lookup functions. Now lookup has three functions majorly. In Microsoft Excel history, it started with lookup first. Then if you ask me which is the next big formula that came up after that, was the vertical lookup, and finally the H lookup, right? So lookup is something like control and F function, right? So if you just press control and F, you can just look up the number, right? So 19800, and you should get the data, so it takes you there. So the lookup function, if you just go and just type up lookup, right, it'll give you the lookup function out here. And it's very similar to the control F function, but it's not really very accurate. So if you've got two data points which are very similar to each other, specifically it might happen with letters, then lookup function will not yield you too many results. So that's the reason why you have another version of it, which is the vertical lookup. Now the lookup got modified into either a specific vertical lookup or a horizontal lookup. Now, the way to understand that is the orientation of data can either be vertical or it can be horizontal. Right? For example, if you see this data structure out here, right, the headers that you see are in columns, right, but the flow of the data is vertical, right? So that means if you talk about customer number, then the data is vertical, right? But you could also have columns in you could also have data structures in which the column or the headers of the data might be to the left, right? For example, customer number could be to the left and the data could be flowing to the right, right? And that's where a horizontal lookup function can come into picture. Now both of them work on the same principle. So if you understand VLOOKUP, more or less you just need to change the orientation, and then the same logic will apply, right? But 99% of the cases we use the VLOOKUP function, right? So let's first understand how do we use that, right? Now, as with any function, I tend to try and opening up the function in a blank Excel, right? So let's just type up VLOOKUP, right? And if you see the explanation of VLOOKUP, it will throw you a description of the function which says looks for a value in the leftmost column of a table, right? That's an important statement, and then returns a value in the same row from a column you specify, right? So if I have to explain VLOOKUP in two parts, the first part is it looks for the data, in the leftmost column of the table, right? And the second part is, if you just open up the VLOOKUP description again, and then returns a value in the same row from a column you specify. Okay, so the second description is the same row from column specified, right? So two parts. First is leftmost column of a table, and second is same row from a column you specify. All right, now the first part of the function is the function description is very important, the leftmost column of a table, right? Now I will just try to elaborate on that, the fact that you're not talking about, the function is not talking about the original data table, right? The table that you see out here, it's not talking about that orientation. It's talking about when I will do the selection, my selection has to be in such a way that the data that I'm trying to look up, the column has to be to the left, right? So for example, just try to pay attention for some time. This might sound confusing, but if you pay attention for a couple of minutes, this will be clear forever. All right, so now if somebody tells us that, okay, you need to find the customer name for customer number, which is 19800, right? Now 19800 is in which column, right? So if you see, 19800 is in the customer number column, right? Now the customer number column in the original data table is already to the left, right? But when I use the function, I actually have to specify a table something like this. I have to do a selection something like this, right? So the VLOOKUP function is talking about my selection, not the table which is already there. All right. So let's get started with just applying this. So let's open up the VLOOKUP function. Okay, and I will explain you this in parts what I mean. So the first part of the function is obviously the lookup value. What are you trying to look up for? So I'm looking up for 19800. Fantastic. Put a comma to that. Now this is the table that the function was describing, that the data which you are looking up has to be to the leftmost side of your selection. So in this case, coincidentally, the data is already on the left hand side, right? So my selection would be something like this. So, but the VLOOKUP function is talking about your selection, right? So this is my selection. So that's the table that VLOOKUP function is talking about, right? Now the second part of the description of the function said same row from the column you specify, right? So what VLOOKUP is going to do now is that once it has identified 19800 is on the 7th row, right, it will give you the data from the same row. So the row is not going to change. So it's just gonna say, okay, this is the row which the data is on. Now you tell me which column data do you need, right? So I will say that, okay, give me the second column data. So because this is the first column, customer number is the first column, and customer name is the second column. So I'm going to specify in the formula. So if you see here, I have given you the column index number, right? So I have specified this is the column data on the same row which I need the data for, right? Now put a comma to that, and now it's going to ask me whether I want an exact match or an approximate match. Now we most likely all the time would be requiring an exact match, right? So a true match would give you an approximate match, and that can be used when you're not sure what you're looking up for. So if you have a lookup value which is closer to your number but it's not exact, then you can use the approximate match, right? For which the sign would be 1, but for an exact match the value is 0, right? And we close it, right? So there you go, you found the customer name, right? Now you will understand in the next part of it, which I have to find profits using customer name. I have to use customer name, right? So customer name is going to be lookup value. So now you will have a thorough understanding of what I mean by to the leftmost side, right? So my lookup value is going to be the name, right? So you can use text data also. There is no such limitations in VLOOKUP. You can use text data to find lookup data in VLOOKUP function. So there's no such limitation. Also, I will try to emphasize on the fact when I will be doing the selection that it does not matter whether you select the headers in your table or not, right? So let's get started. So the lookup value is the name, customer name, which is on I7, and the table array. Right now, remember what the first part of the function says, that it will try to look up Goodworks and Company to the leftmost side of the table that you select. Right. So I cannot select the data from A column, because then it will start looking up for data in the A column. Right. So I have to start looking, select the data from here, because it will start looking up for data, customer name, to the leftmost side of the table I select. But to the right, my selection really doesn't matter. So it's up to me whether I want to select data till profit, or if I want to restrict myself till revenue, if revenue is what I'm trying to find out, right? But in this case, if you see, using customer name, we have to find profits. So I have done the selection till the E column. And also just notice that I've also used the headers, right? It doesn't really matter, right? Because at least in the column side, it really doesn't matter, because that has been counted for, right? Now so I've done the selection here. Now the column data that I want, right? So it will try to return the value in the same row from the column you specify, right? So it's going to go to Goodworks and Company, and Goodworks and Company is in this row out here, right? Which is the 7th row for the entire Excel, right? But it will start counting from here, right? Because you've selected from customer name, so it's going to count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. So in the 6th row, from the column you specify. Now what is the column that I'm going to specify? I'm going to specify this column, right? So this is first, this is second, this is third, and this is fourth column. So fourth column, and the range lookup, which is exact match, so I'm going to select as 0, right? So there you go, that's your profits, right? And why don't you try out in your exercise, why don't you use order number now to find revenue? And in the next exercise, in the next video, I will show what the limitations of using VLOOKUP function is to find customer number using revenue, right? So thank you for watching this video, and I hope the VLOOKUP function is clear to you. If it's not, then please do put up in the comment box, and I will try to clarify that again. Thank you for watching. Bye bye.